Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming to our talk. This is an updated version of what we presented at DEFCON, and we are very happy to bring something from DEFCON back home here at DefCamp. This presentation will start with the technical part and will be followed by some fun stories that I'm sure you will enjoy. My name is Eduard Agavriloae. I was a senior penetration tester at KPMG Romania while I've done this research, and I want to thank them for supporting this research and trusting the idea or maybe not understanding what we wanted to do. But I'm just kidding. Seriously, guys, thank you. I'm doing cloud research, and I keep calling myself an AWS offensive security expert, and nobody challenged that, so I will just go ahead with this title. And currently, I'm learning on how to teach others about cloud hacking. This research started from a cloud configuration review engagement where I was tasked to identify misconfigurations in a cloud environment. And I ran an enumeration tool, and looking through the findings, I saw for the first time the critical finding AMI is set to public, which was indeed something that piqued my interest. Now, who knows what an AMI is? Okay, that's more than I expected. And who used at least once an EC2 instance? Okay, that's good, because if you ever used an EC2 instance, then you kind of know what an AMI is, because an AMI is essentially a virtual machine snapshot that you can pre-configure, set some files there, maybe source code, secrets, and then you can start multiple EC2 instances from the same baseline, which is a good thing. And we have here, I guess this dot is too small, but we have marketplace AMIs that are official and published by AWS and third parties. And we also have community AMIs, which are published by anyone. Now, obviously, since you can make your own source code and secrets public, you don't actually want to do that. And that's why AMIs, by default, are private. And it's actually very hard to make them public. And from our tests, there is absolutely no way to make an AMI public without actually acknowledging the risks involved. And obviously, the issue is that the AMI can be public. And this client not only had one public AMI, but they had 5. And I was a nice guy, and I asked them, hey, can I take a look to evaluate the risk that you are exposed to? But I was just very curious what was inside of the AMIs. And they said no, which made me regret I even asked. However, it kept my curiosity up, because I asked myself if there are any public AMIs with sensitive data out there. Because if one company had 5 public AMIs, surely there must be other companies with public AMIs as well. And we wanted to do this research so bad that we haven't checked any previous work that was done. And in the middle of the research, we identified these 2 previous researches done by Dolev Farhi. He scanned, based on keywords, AMIs but from a single AWS region. And this, from our perspective, was not enough to cover the full potential of the research. And then was Ben Morris that searched secrets in public ABS snapshots, which first we believed there is a big overlap between the 2 researches, but in fact, there is very little overlap, as we will see shortly. So we set some goals. We wanted to dig secrets in every public AMI across all AWS regions. We wanted to have some fun. We wanted to do responsible disclosure if it was the case. And a hidden goal was maybe to make some money, get some bounties. And my colleague Matei will tell you more how that went. Now, we were ready to start, and we wanted to collect all the images that were available. And in order to do that, we have to include the images that are deprecated. And we have to mention this flag called include deprecated. By default, when you make an AMI public, after 2 years, the AMI will be automatically deprecated by AWS. And you can also deprecate your own AMI. And if you deprecate it, it will not be available in the web portal, and it will also not be returned by default from the CLI. So you have to mention this flag in order to get all the AMIs. And we did this across all the 27 at that time AWS regions, and we got to 3.1 million AMIs. And we wanted to scan all of them, but we knew this was not feasible. So we removed some AMIs. For example, we removed AMI from Marketplace because since they are from Marketplace and used by other companies, most likely they will not have secrets. That left us with 1.5 million AMIs. A lot better, but still number too high for us to scan all the images. So we further removed AMIs owned by AWS. This left us with 1 million. Still a big number. And analyzing the data, we noticed that there were some AWS accounts with thousands of public AMIs. And we figured that these owners most likely are some kind of unofficial publishers of AMIs. So we did a trade-off, and we removed any owner that had more than 50 public AMIs in their account. And if there is any company that actually had, by accident, more than 50 public AMIs, well, security-wise, they are in a point of no return, and honestly, we can't help them. So it was a trade-off we were okay to make. And this left us with 27,000 AMIs, which we knew it was a number we can work it. And we did some fine-tuning in the end. We removed AMIs with more than 3 volumes, or volumes bigger than 200 gigabytes, because some AMIs had 17 volumes, and some of the volumes were as big as 20 terabytes. Obviously, I'm very curious what is inside of them, but it would have taken a lot of time to scan them. And the final number was 26,000 AMIs, which was a number we decided to go ahead with. This is the distribution based on the regions. So the biggest region is US East 1 with 7,000 AMIs. The biggest region from Europe is Europe West 1. And the region with the smallest number of AMIs was Israel Central 1 with only 30 public AMIs, obviously after we did the filtering. And when I say we collected the AMIs, at this point, I'm referring to the JSON definition of every AMI. And here we can see some interesting information, like we have the owner ID. This is relevant because if I know the account ID of my target, I can directly search to see if they have public AMIs. Additionally, we have description and name. Again, if I want to target a specific company, let's say I want to target DefCamp, right? I will search for AMIs that have DefCamp in their name or description. We also have some information about the snapshot. So this is the volume of the AMI that actually contains the data. And even if we have the whole snapshot ID, just because the AMI is public does not make the volume public and directly accessible. Good. Now, we had our list of AMIs to scan. And now we have to find a way to access the contents within the AMI. And this method must be time and cost effective, must be as automated as possible, and also as reliable as possible. And during our research, we tried 4 different methods to access the contents from an AMI, and all 4 of them work in some cases, but only this one worked for our scenario. And here we have an instance that's already working. We call it the secret searcher instance. That's in the bottom part. Essentially, this was an instance that we were able to connect to. It was configured and working for us to work with it. And then we just started a new EC2 instance based on the target AMI. And once the instance was running, we just detached the volume and reattach it to the secret searcher instance. Essentially, it's like receiving a laptop that you can't start, you can't access the data from it, and you just take out the hard disk, connect it to your working laptop, and you analyze the data. That's essentially what we did, and everything was happening within the AWS environment, which made everything fast, and it was also as reliable as possible from what we discovered. Now, let me show you in a demo how this went in manually first. So we will search AMIs based on the description that contains securitycafe.ro. We can see that if we change the region, the AMI will not be returned. That's why you have to search in every region. And also, if you don't mention include deprecated, the image will not be returned. You can also search based on the account ID. So if you know the owner, you can search to see if they have any public AMIs. That would be a quick win. But let's just go ahead with the description with securitycafe.ro. We have the image ID, and we have the owner ID, and we also have information about the snapshot. So let's try to just copy the volume in our own AWS account. And we will see shortly that we will get an error. Just because the AMI is public doesn't mean the ABS snapshot is also accessible. So we will use the method with the secret searcher. We have an instance that's already running. And now we will start an instance based on the target AMI that will be in the same availability zone as the secret searcher instance. Once the instance is running, we will stop it in order for us to detach the volume. And once the instance is stopped, we can actually delete it to remove some costs. So stopping the instance, and we will detach the volume. And once the volume is detached, we will just reattach it to the secret searcher, where we should be able to mount the new volume and actually scan it. For making things easier, we will connect through the web portal. And one error we encountered a lot was an UID collision between the two volumes of the secret searcher instance. So we will run this command, and we will see that both volumes have the same UID, and this prevents us from mounting the second volume. But we can fix that with XFS admin, and once that is fixed, we should be able to mount the volume and just access the data within it. And obviously, the first thing we did in most cases were to search for AWS credentials, but just because the credentials are here doesn't mean they are still valid, so we have to actually validate them. Now, obviously, this is a proof of concept from our environment, and the credentials are valid. But when we first found the first pair of access keys, this is exactly how we felt. And in the same day, we identified 10 more valid access keys that worked, and we knew back there that we have something worth pursuing further. Now, we also developed a tool that automates all this workflow. We called it Cloud Travel, and the AMI that this demo is based on is still available and online until Monday, if you want to try the tool as well. And here we will search for AMI that has the Cloud Travel keyword in it. We can see this description about the Bitcoin wallet. And we will take the AMI ID. And for Cloud Travel, we have to specify the region, a bucket where the data will be saved, and the AMI ID. Cloud Travel will create everything in the background that is required, and this is very fast forwarded. It takes a lot longer. But essentially now the data that was in the AMI should be available in the S3 bucket. The thing that it might fail is the mounting, which if that fails, you can go with the manual approach and just try to manually mount the volume. Having this many types of Linux instances, volumes, and so on, it's very hard to have a single method that works for mounting absolutely every case. Now we copied all the contents from the bucket locally, and again, searching for the AWS credentials file, we will see that we have another pair of access keys, which are still valid if you want to try it. We left it valid so that you can try something more fun without accessing someone else's data. So as I said, the credentials are valid. Cool. We will also have another QR code at the end of the presentation, but this is the repository and the tool I've told you about. As a high-level architecture, this is what things look like. We had a master EC2 instance where we ran our main automation script, and then in every region, we started a secret searcher instance, and then we started batches of 20 AMIs in the same region, and one by one, we detached the volume and reattached it to the secret searcher where we exfiltrated credentials. Now, writing 100 to 1,200 lines of code, waiting about 40 days of scanning time, and this is a funny thing. Essentially, my initial estimation for this research was about $13,000, which my manager said yes to, which was great, and I guess everyone was happy that in the end we only paid $450 for 500 gigabytes of carefully selected data that contained secrets, repositories, and Matei will tell you more about it.
Cool. Thank you very much, Eduard. Well, here's the secret searcher section. So here we're going to talk about how we search for secrets, what sort of secrets we found, and what we were able to do with them. You know what? I'll do something different here. I will not introduce myself. Actually, yesterday was Thanksgiving, so I just want to show my gratitude to everybody who was involved in this research. So firstly, Eduard, thank you very much for taking me on board. It was a fantastic experience. Secondly, well, thank you to the team in KPMG Romania, because they sponsored this research and they said yes to the initial estimation of $13,000. Well, thank you, Alexa, for listening to this presentation like 100 times. And last but not least, thank you all for being here. Cool. So, for our initial strategy for searching for secrets, we wanted something simple. We wanted to avoid reinventing the wheel. There's plenty of tools already available to search for sensitive data, and one of these tools which we decided to use was TruffleHog. The problem with it was that it was quite slow for our needs, and it also created, well, quite a few false positives. And while we would have been able to work through the false positives, the fact that it was slow was the main issue. Because, well, a slow scanning tool meant longer EC2 instance running times, which in turn would have probably meant a way higher AWS bill. So we had to adjust, and for that, we went back to the Zen of Python. More specifically, simple is better than complex, complex is better than complicated, and special cases aren't special enough to break the rules. With this in mind, we went to something even easier. We decided to look for specific files only, well, files and directories. We wanted to look for SSH, private keys, AWS credentials, environment secrets, secrets leaked within Git repositories. And for these, we had very, very specific names. So now we faced another issue. We had to find a tool which allows us to look for files and directories based on their names. It should be quick. And it should be, well, as simple as possible. And guess what? The tool was, well, pretty obvious. Find. We decided to use find, not too much of a tool, right? And here's what we ended up with. A simple 6-liner. It could be a 1-liner, but whatever. We were looking specifically for .aws, .ssh, credentials.xml, and a few others. Cool. Now, besides this, we also used find to get an index of all the files and directories included in all the AMIs. Now, keep in mind that this is only a proof of concept. We could have made this very, very complex, but our point here was not to find everything which is available on public AMIs, but rather to show that this works, that there are sensitive pieces of data on there. All right. We did still need to set up a few more things. For instance, we had to set up some automations for verifying AWS credentials, and you'll see in a minute just why. We also used Git leaks, a quite interesting tool allowing us to search for secrets within Git repositories. Then, in order to validate some of the keys which we were able to obtain, we used key hacks. It's a great repository for methods of verifying these keys. And, well, I hate to say this, but we were still left with a ton of manual work. So, after our data collection phase, this is what we found. So, yeah, you can see about 2 million generic API keys. Keep in mind, many of these are false positives. Well, over 100,000 potential AWS keys, over 20,000 private SSH keys, and so on and so forth. Cool. So you can actually see why we needed all of these tools and automations to verify these keys and credentials. Now let's look at the AWS ones. Out of the over 100,000 potential AWS credentials, we found a bit over 120 valid AWS credentials, out of which 20 were root. And I know that this does not seem like a lot. It's only like, what, 1% of the initial number. But think about it this way. These AWS credentials gave us access to the AWS accounts of over 100 companies. So let that sink in. Well, and for 20 of them, we had full control, root. Right. Now what, you may ask? Well, let's find the owners. And in order to do this, we use the get contact information call in order to find the owners where available. This wasn't the case for all the owners, but sometimes we were able to tell the companies, find an email address, we were able to get in touch with somebody. Well, now, we were thinking that it's only small boutique companies affected by this sort of issue, right? But no, actually, we found companies worth over 200 billion, respectively 50 billion, companies that you definitely heard about, but we can't name at this point. We found large telecom companies. We found companies in security and tech, companies all over the world. So we were actually surprised. Now, you may be arguing that, well, okay, I have an AWS account. I can write down whatever in the contact information, right? And you're absolutely right. But here's where Eduard and I have done quite a bit of OSINT. We went on to LinkedIn and other social media platforms and found these people, confirmed that they're actually working at these companies, and funnily enough, in some cases, they even had AWS certifications listed on their accounts, suggesting that they know how to properly configure an AMI. Well, what can I say about that? Cool. Now, let's talk about the impact here. And I think that this is the 50 billion company. We found a bug bounty program on BugCrowd. We reported the issue, and we got it confirmed as a P1, so a critical issue. And that's our first critical vulnerability in such a program. We were very, very excited about this. Now, let's see a quick show of hands. Based on a P1 vulnerability in a $50+ billion company, who thinks we made, well, 5 digits, so over $10,000? Okay, a few hands, nice. How about 4 digits? Let's do 1,000 to 10,000. Yeah, more hands. Now let's go with something very, very conservative. Maybe 3 digits, yeah, 100 to, right. Well, funnily enough, this is what we made. And yeah, I've misled you a bit with this question because it wasn't really a bug bounty program, but rather a vulnerability disclosure program. So in other words, we didn't really expect to make anything out of it, but yeah, we definitely thought of what could have been. Right. Well, we quickly moved over the disappointment of this little issue here because we found something that I think is even more interesting. I like to call this story how we earned and lost $3 million in a week. Well, this is a fun one. So remember, we found some Git repositories within these public AMIs, and from there we were able to extract about 900 Stripe API keys. For those of you who don't know, Stripe is a payment service not unlike PayPal, let's say. So we used one of these keys, and we noticed this, well, 7-digit amount in USD. That was pretty cool, right? So, of course, our first thought was, let's check the documentation, and let's see how a threat actor would go about transferring these funds out of this account and into their own. For research purposes only, of course. And guess what? We jumped into the documentation, and we noticed that the amount is in cents. So what we thought was $3 million was actually 31,000. So we lost $3 million just by reading the documentation. If there's anything you can learn out of this, well, don't read the documentation. Right. Well, after our second wave of disappointment, we decided to find the contact person and email them, let them know, well, of what's going on with their account and that there could be a bit of damage there. Eduard wrote an absolutely fantastic email, and we waited and waited and waited, and 2 weeks later, we still did not receive a response. So we thought, well, didn't we prove impact? Maybe they don't understand the issue. So we thought, okay, let's prove impact now. So in order to do this, we've registered to their cheapest subscription of $9.99 per month, and went into the API. We confirmed that the transaction was successful, and then we triggered a refund. And guess what? Going into the bank account, the refund worked, it was successful. And we still had access to the service, despite the refund. So now, knowing that we can actually talk about money, we dug a bit into the company, we found the CEO's email, wrote to the CEO, and the CEO said, well, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Can you kindly explain this vulnerability further? And also CC'd the CTO, who, guess what, was the person who we've initially emailed anyway. We were like, okay, we gave a proper report with the finding, impact, recommendations. And what we got back from the CTO was, thanks for sharing the relevant information. We have made the AMIs private for now, and we'll be replacing the keys. Thanks so much for responsible disclosure. Right, so that was actually incredibly disappointing. What do you mean, for now? Will you make them public in the future? And how about we will be replacing the keys? When? These have to be replaced now. Well, we forgot about this because we had a lot of data to go through still. So we kept digging, other companies, just general research. And 1 month later, I was forced to remember, because when I checked my bank account, yep, $9.99 going out. I was so excited about being able to trigger the refund that I forgot to cancel my subscription, right? And you know what? I know it's only $9.99, but we're broke, honestly. So we couldn't let $9.99 pass by just like that. So I thought, okay, let me try that API key again, and let's see if it still works. And guess what? It worked. And I triggered another refund. So now think about our disappointment now, when 1 month later, the keys were still valid. Did they actually understand the impact? I have no idea. Well, moving on. There's a lot more impact than only this. I know this is a fun story, but there's more that we could do. So look, for instance, for this specific research, we had to spawn up all these different instances, and the costs were about $450, which isn't that much, but if we can avoid paying that, why wouldn't we? So, of course, we could have used some of these 120 accounts to spawn instances and potentially do this research for free. Alternatively, something even more fun, well, AWS-based ransomware. That may have gotten us rich, or in jail, who knows. In any case, when you typically think about ransomware, you can think about these, I don't know, huge groups of developers working on evasion techniques and all that jazz. Well, once you have access to an AWS account, this, well, glorified one-liner could actually list your S3 buckets, delete everything within the, well, copy everything from the S3 buckets locally, and remove all the data. And then, instead of the data which you would expect to see in your S3 buckets, you could find a ransom note, such as this one. All your files have been stolen. You must buy us a Dubai chocolate to get your files back. And we know that this chocolate is, well, the thing these days. Now, we have to say this. This is just a joke, right? We didn't do this. However, it's pretty fun that we could have done this, right? Okay.
So remember the initial list of objectives? So we wanted to do responsible disclosure. Well, when we actually had to do it, I kind of felt bad for setting that objective because it was a horrible process. Most of these accounts, they only had a website in their account information, so no email. And we had to go to their website, search for a contact email, drop a generic email because we didn't know who will read the actual email. And sending almost 70 responsible disclosure emails, we only got about 10 responses back. And we had to go even further to handle some special cases. For one fintech company, we had to contact the national CERT in their country because this company operated with multinational banks that also operate in Romania. For one client, I had to schedule a sales call and present them this vulnerability. And we had, all the research was done. We had the article written and we wanted to publish it, but we knew for sure that if we do it, we might bring a high impact on the affected customers. So we waited 90 days, and only 10 AWS keys were invalidated. And we really wanted to publish this research, but we didn't know how to further reduce the impact. And that's when we decided to try our luck with the AWS security team. And honestly, I didn't even expect them to respond to us. But not only they took us seriously, but they actually set a call with us. We explained the research. We gave them proof that we had the access we mentioned. And they notified the client. And because they did that, from 120 valid access keys, only 50 were now valid just a few days later. And the experience with the AWS security team was so amazing that it actually restored the faith in the responsible disclosure practice. And I want to say that if you have a bad experience with this, just keep in mind that there are companies and people that actually care about security, and don't lose hope because you will find people like this. Now, to give you a short timeline. So on 15th of April, we had about 120 AWS access keys. That was bad. Thankfully, a few days later, AWS notified the client, and now there were only 50 AWS access keys. This is good. Now, we checked a bit later how many keys were valid. What do you think? 82. So, almost half a year later, 32 more AWS access keys were now back being valid. And I don't have an explanation for it. I don't know why this happened. But me, just like you, I like to come to conferences to see the latest research, to see the most cutting-edge hacking technique. But we have to remember that this is the state of the industry in some places. And maybe we should try to fix that before moving forward with other new things. But in any case, that was about the AWS access keys. Talking a bit about how to defend and detect this. So if you have these two settings set at the account level as being disabled, then anyone from your account that has the permission to do so will be able to publish ABS volumes and AMIs. Obviously, you want the settings to be enabled so that publishing will be blocked. Now, you also want to check if you actually have public AMIs, because just because the settings are enabled doesn't mean that you don't have public ABS volumes or AMIs. And this is important because attackers are using this technique to exfiltrate data from your own AWS account. So you have to make sure that you don't have in any region public AMIs. And if you are unlucky and you do have, I would look for this event called Shared Snapshot Volume Created. This is the only event in CloudTrail you get if someone from another AWS account will start an EC2 instance based on your AMI, and it doesn't contain a lot of information. You don't even have the source IP. You only have the account ID, which is not a lot, and in any case, your data is already compromised. And keep in mind that making the AMI private is not enough. You should also analyze what secrets were there. You have to rotate them, and then you have to further analyze the other systems that might have been accessed. We had other data besides AWS access keys, and we did some research on it. Like we had 20,000 JSON Web Tokens. We did some analysis on that, but nothing came out of it. We also had 4,000 SSH keys, private SSH keys, but again, nothing came out of it. Another idea that we had was to look on the big number of repositories that we collected for the private ones, identify the web application in the wild, do some source code review, find vulnerabilities, get some CVEs, but I don't think we will ever touch on that, but it was something that we had in mind in order for another research.
Well, what else can I say? We still had and still have loads of data collected, and we only dug through some of it, for a portion of it. There's still a lot more to find there. Moreover, Ștefan Tița, our colleague from KPMG Romania, has published a blog on his research on Azure CloudQuarry, so he's done something very similar there, and I'm hoping to see a talk on that topic soon. Other than that, Eduard and I are trying to close the Holy Trinity here and do similar research on GCP. Remember the word list, well, the index files I told you earlier. Well, the list of all the paths which we found in all these public AMIs. Well, I've shared a word list on my GitHub containing all of these paths there. So if you want to know what sort of data can be found on these AMIs, go ahead and check those out. In terms of the research objectives, well, we want to dig for secrets in every public AMI across all AWS regions. Well, we didn't really do this because we didn't go into every public AMI, but we searched the ones which we were interested in. So I think that this was successful. Secondly, we wanted to have fun, and hell yeah, we did. Responsible disclosure, well, we hoped to make money out of it. We didn't, but we were able to have some nice responsible disclosure experiences, especially with the AWS security team. Now, this being said, for conclusions, and to be honest, this is a bit sad for me to say, but this piece of research took us across the world. We went to, well, Barcelona, Cluj, Bergamo, Vegas, and now here, back home. And honestly, we're just tired. We had enough of AWS CloudQuarry. So this is probably the last time we will present this research, and we'll just focus on other stuff right now. But here's me encouraging you guys to look into this. There's still a lot more stuff to find. The impact of this research is not yet fully unveiled. Also, security by obscurity is definitely insufficient. So imagine the developers who said, yes, look, I've got this private Git repository, but how is anything private if it is in a public resource? Also, mass exploitation, very, very simple. Eduard and I, two random guys from Romania, were able to do this. Think about what threat actors could do. And also, AMIs are only the tip of the iceberg. There's so many other types of public resources. So please, if you want to do research like this, let us know. Find us on LinkedIn. You can find Eduard on X as well. And we are happy to share some knowledge and help you achieve your goals. This being said, thank you very much for being here. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Matei and Eduard. This was a very insightful session, but I think you just lost us for a second when you mentioned Dubai chocolate, but we're right back. So moving on to the questions, I see one here, yeah.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. I have a curiosity. Did that big company, the $200 billion company, respond to your email and fix the issue?
Yes, as far as I know, with the big companies, when we contacted, they fixed those pretty quickly, as far as I remember.
We only know about one, the one with 50 billion. We didn't receive a response for the one with 200 billion. And funny enough, it was a client of another KPMG department from another country, and I think they took it from there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for this insightful project and research. I had a question while you guys were presenting. Have you actually thought about, or have you seen any research into attackers probably setting up reverse shell in any images and then publishing those?
Sorry, can you speak a bit louder?
Oh, yeah. Have you seen any research or possibly work done by peers in your area where attackers set up reverse shell in an image and then set up that image public? Have you seen that, or have you thought about looking at in using your scanner?
Well, I can tell you for sure that anyone can publish their own AMI, so I can insert a backdoor there, and that is obviously possible. And I'm sure some of these images might be backdoor. That's why AWS recommends for you to use the AWS official and the trusted AMIs. But keep in mind that just because we found secrets in public AMIs, that didn't give us any permission to modify the contents from the AMI. And but yeah, just be careful with the community AMIs. I wouldn't use them unless it's from a trusted vendor.
Yeah, because we had a red team simulation in our company, and someone wanted to do a forensic analysis on an image, but they actually set that up as an AMI image and basically triggered the reverse shell once again.
Right.
So this is what I was thinking about.
Yeah, it wasn't us. But I would love to take a look at that AMI.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Hey, did you find a reason for this company to make their MAIs public? Because it's not an easy process. They would have to be actively doing it.
So the question is,
why did they have these AMIs public?
I think it's because they wanted to share the AMI cross account. Something that we identified that we definitely didn't like was small companies that were doing web applications for clients that don't know how to do them, were actually making their clients vulnerable by making the AMIs public. And I think they just did it to make cross-account sharing of AMIs more accessible. But obviously, you can share with specific AWS accounts. And I guess they just didn't know how, or they didn't care.
Thank you. Can you give us information when iOS set default settings to be disabled for the sharing? What is the timeline? Before your search or after that?
Sorry, can you repeat, please?
When they set default settings to be disabled sharing of the AMA.
Oh, so I think that the AMIs are actually by default being created as private. You have to actually...
By default, it was enable sharing, if I understand.
So no, the default setting here is to have them private. Actually, to make them public, you have to make them public and also write down something along the lines of accept, or you have to actually write down some text. So there's no way you can make AMIs public by mistake. They are made intentionally.
Intentionally only.
Yes.
The process is like this. You create the AMI, it's private. You have to disable the account level setting. Then you have to type confirm. Then you have to go back to the AMI and actually make it public. So that's the whole process, which obviously can be made by mistake.
Intentionally. This is my...
Yeah, always intentional, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take one more question. It's one in the back that...
Well, thank you, everybody, for the questions. It's great to have so many of them today. Fantastic.
Hello, Eduard. Hello, Matei. Thanks for this extensive research. And I think you showed us a very interesting new threat attack scenario. I didn't thought about it before. My question for you, because you presented very well this situation with the company, with the Stripe API key disclosed and how they responded to your responsible disclosures. What recommendations would you have for companies maybe to understand better the impact of such vulnerabilities in the future and to basically grow this collaboration between researchers and their team, their own internal employees?
Well, that's actually a very good question. I have a few thoughts here. So first thing first, it's always all about impact. So even, taking the simple example of web application vulnerabilities, I don't know, creating an alert for cross-site scripting isn't enough. You should typically prove impact. And with these sort of vulnerabilities or misconfigurations, such as the public AMIs, you have to still prove impact when you show these. I think we proved impact, to be honest, in this specific case. It's just that they probably didn't have the resources, didn't understand. I have no idea. Other than that, I would recommend that companies start bug bounty programs and also cover the AWS or generally cloud sort of environment. That would be great, and for sure that would raise awareness. And then perhaps as a bit of a shameless plug, just watch our talk. Just get these companies to watch our talk and come and see us. Maybe it won't be the last time we speak about CloudQuarry then.
But another recommendation would be to actually have security contact details so that security research can contact you. And for Stripe, for example, we had 20 more valid keys, and we didn't know how to invalidate them or actually get a response from the customers. So we had to report it on the bug bounty program of Stripe, and I don't know if they invalidate them. But it's a hard process right now, and it should be improved.
Thank you very much. Hope the companies will be careful next time and will apply your recommendations.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.